Today we're heading to the factory floor for a real face-off. We're talking brute force repetition versus nimble flexibility. It's a battle of philosophies that basically decides how everything you own gets made. So, let's dive in.
So have you ever really stopped to think about this? I mean, on one hand, you've got a factory just cranking out millions of identical soda cans. But then on the other hand, you have a place that builds unique, custom items one by one, maybe even the computer you're watching this on right now. How can both of those possibly be efficient?
Well, the secret isn't just about bigger, faster machines. Nope. It's all in the philosophy of how the work itself is organized. We're going to look at two completely different systems, each one a master in its own right.
Okay, first up in the ring, we've got the undisputed heavyweight champion of mass production, the assembly line. Its entire game is about scale and doing the same exact thing over and over and over again, perfectly.
Just picture that classic conveyor belt, right? A product starts its journey at one end and just chugs along through a whole series of stations. At every single stop, a worker or a robot does one very specific, specialized task before it moves on down the line.
The process itself is just brilliantly simple. Raw materials go in one side, they pass from one specialist to the next, and bam, a finished product pops out the other end. It's super straightforward, it's predictable, and it is incredibly efficient. But only when you're making thousands or even millions of the exact same item.
But what if you need to build different things? What happens when the market changes on a dime? Well, that's where our second contender comes into play. Cell production. This is the champion of being agile and offering lots of variety.
So instead of that long, sprawling line, I want you to picture a small, self-contained little workstation, a cell. Inside that cell, you might have one worker or maybe a small team, and they handle multiple assembly steps for a single product. Sometimes they'll build the whole thing right there, from start to finish. And this is where you really see the flexibility. I mean, an assembly line is, well, it's a line, it's pretty rigid. But cells, they can be all sorts of shapes. You might see a U-shape to help workers move around less, or it could be a single stall where one person puts together the entire product. That kind of adaptability is totally core to the cell philosophy.
Okay, so we've met our two contenders. Now it's time for the main event. Let's put them side by side and see how they really stack up in a direct showdown.
First things first, what's their main goal? For line production, it's all about pure volume, making a huge quantity of just a few things as cheaply as you possibly can. Cell production, though, is all about variety, making smaller batches of many, many different things. And the teams that do the work, they look completely different. A line needs a big crew of specialists, where each person has mastered one simple, repetitive motion. A cell, on the other hand, runs on a smaller team of multi-talented generalists who understand the whole process. And that brings us to a huge trade-off: the cost. Setting up a line production system requires a massive upfront investment in all that specialized equipment. Cell production is way cheaper to get started with, but, and this is a big but, the real investment comes later, in all the training you need for those multi-skilled workers.
So let's zoom out for a second and look at the big picture here. You can see that the strengths of one are pretty much the weaknesses of the other. The line gives you incredible speed and really low cost per item, but it is so inflexible. One little breakdown can bring the entire factory to a halt. In contrast, the cell gives you amazing flexibility and helps your workers build skills, but it just can't compete on a mass scale, and productivity can really vary depending on the team.
So, after this whole head-to-head battle, who's the winner? Well, like any good engineering problem, the answer, it's just not that simple.
Honestly, asking which one is better is kind of the wrong question. It's like asking if a hammer is better than a screwdriver. The real question is, what job are you trying to do?
And right there, that's the key takeaway. The product determines the process. Simple as that. If your business is making millions of identical things, say cars or smartphones, the assembly line is the undisputed king. But if you're building custom PCs or operating in a fast-changing market like electronics, the adaptability of the cell is what's going to give you the edge. So, the final thought I want to leave you with is this. The most successful companies aren't just the ones that pick the right system for today. They're the ones that can see when their market is shifting and then have the courage to switch from the line to the cell. Or you know what, maybe even back again.